Okay, and we're starting our next code demonstration. There's a couple of concepts that I'd like to show in this video, and hopefully I can show them at their basic level. The first thing I want to show is a nav bar with Flexbox. And so we learned the foundations of Flexbox yesterday, and all the, I think we counted like 9 or 10 different Flexbox properties in CSS. And so I want to do a nav bar simply with Flexbox. And with that, I want to introduce this concept of CSS Media Queries. And so we're going to be combining these two concepts together in this video, and let's go ahead and get started. Now, I'm just gonna go off the top of my head here. So a nav bar belongs in a nav tag. It's worth stating that even if you have multiple nav bars, like it's pretty common to have a nav bar maybe at the top in the header, and then maybe another nav bar in the footer, but they all belong in nav tags. And so you might have a header nav bar, and you might have a footer nav bar, and so it doesn't really matter how many nav bars you have. They belong in a nav tag. And so that's just a little one-off little side comment that wherever your nav bars exist, or not even nav bars, just your links, wherever your links exist, let's get them inside of a nav tag, considered semantic. Okay. With that being the case, it is also considered semantic to include your links in an unordered list, because you would say that a nav bar is a list of links, and that's kind of how it's viewed. And let's just say we've got 5 links. And so here we've got header nav ul li, and this is just trying to be semantic, and just to fill in these links. Well, of course, before we even do this, let's code an anchor tag that goes nowhere. And now we actually have dummy links. And Visual Studio's nice and fun with its hotkeys. And so if I just launch this up, here's what we have. And it's probably what you would expect. Of course, the first thing I would start to do is remove the bullets and remove the underlines, and maybe start to get these looking like buttons instead of just text links. Now, the UL is also kind of the container. Keep in mind, everything's a box. The header has a box, the nav has a box, the UL has a box, each LI has a box, each anchor tag has a box. That's the CSS box model. Okay, so if I'm looking at all these boxes on my page, if I'm thinking about these boxes, I'm thinking, well, which box should be the flex box? And I'm probably looking at this UL as my flex box because I want each LI to be a child, right? So let's go ahead, and I've got an external style sheet already linked here, and let's go ahead and on my UL display flex, and that's going to be a flex box. My UL will be a flex box, and that's going to get my links in a row. That looks horrid. Of course, we'll fix that. Let me get to the point where I can Alt-Tab back and forth, and that's going to be nice and easy. How do we turn the underline off? Well, that's on the list on the UL. We'll say list style type of none, and that turns my, not the underlines off, but the bullets. That turns the bullets off. Okay, and we want to turn the links, the underlines off on our links. A:link, comma, A:, and it's very common convention to see a lot of these selectors combined using the commas. It's also important that when you code these in this order: A::link, A::visited, focus, A::hover, A::active. At one point, if you coded these out of order, it would break everything. And so LVFHA, for some reason I have that memorized, and link, visited, focus, hover, active is the order in which you code your pseudo selectors for your links. To turn text decoration to none, and that removes the underline. Okay, so haven't really done a whole lot here, but I want to introduce this concept of media queries. We've already started on our Navbar. Media queries, obviously these are CSS media queries. So media queries are, boy, I'll be really generic. They are things that you can code that adds breakpoints for devices, more specifically for device widths. And you could code media queries in a lot of different ways, but the most common, the most used way is to say, okay, how wide is the device that you're browsing this web page with? And so most commonly with a media query, you're looking at the width of the device and you're applying CSS rules for that width. You know, how wide is the device? And so these breakpoints are looking at this device width, okay? And so right away you can see we don't have any breakpoints for our CSS. And basically what this says right now, these CSS rules that we're writing are for all device widths. Okay, doesn't matter the width of your device. These CSS rules are being applied for all device widths. But I'm gonna code my first media query, which is going to change this. It's no longer, these generic rules that we're writing are no longer going to be for all device widths. And I'm going to use the industry standard approach called mobile first development. Okay, mobile first development is the concept that if you had to take a guess, you're probably going to guess right. So here's the question. Which device, be it a widescreen monitor or a cell phone, is harder to code as far as where content goes?
A phone.
A phone. And why do you guess that?
I don't know, it's newer. Most websites are made with like a computer anyway.
Yeah, so traditionally, you know, we got really used to doing layouts with a widescreen monitor. But another, and you're right, and the answer is a cell phone is considered a little bit harder. And one of the big reasons in my mind, if you think of a widescreen monitor, you've got a lot of space to fit content on. Okay, whereas, and so you have these concepts like above the fold. What is above the fold? Well, above the fold in a newspaper is where you put all the important concepts, because a newspaper would be on display in a newspaper vending machine or whatever you call it, and you're trying to sell the newspaper above the fold. And the same concept applies for websites. All the important concept you put above the scroll, right? So you don't have to scroll down. You're trying to sell your widgets. You're trying to get the user to search for their friends or make a post on Twitter. You're trying to do everything above the scroll, if you will. And so there's a lot of real estate above the scroll on a widescreen desktop, but there's a lot less real estate on a mobile phone. So purely from what content goes above the scroll is much harder on a mobile device, right? So it's just harder from like a strategy point of view, like what content do we put up top? Okay, so mobile first is pretty much, now there is a desktop first development, right? So versus there is another approach, desktop first development. Okay, and so a lot of times if you already have a website built that's not mobile responsive, then you might do a desktop first development because you already have that website built. To Vinny's point, that might be the case for some websites that haven't been updated in 15 years. Okay, but most standard websites actually do a mobile first development because the idea is let's get the website looking good on mobile, and then you can scale up on devices, which in theory is easier now that you have more real estate. Okay, so the first media query, so the tag, and look at this, as soon as I type an @ symbol, Emmet gives me an abbreviation. So the @media, and they even give you @media screen. Now, and so this is to say a screen is like any device that we typically use. The other media, like sometimes there are media queries, for example, for printers. And so you would all agree that a web page might be styled differently for a printer than how you might style it for a widescreen monitor, right? A printer, for example, you might hide the nav bar on a printer because it's just not relevant to have a navigation bar printed out for an end user. Like that's just not useful. So there's also an @media print, okay? But there's a parenthesis here that you can apply in these parentheses. You can apply the device width, and so minimum width, and so this is going to be 600 pixels. And so 600 pixels is a good breakpoint. I'm going to recommend in this class, because you're going to see a lot of different breakpoints. In other words, different widths for different devices, and these breakpoints have changed over the years. A really good rule of thumb that I came across some time ago is, and it's easy to remember, is just starting at 600 pixels. Then you go 6, 9, 12, and up. And so this is one breakpoint at 600 pixels wide. Turns out that now devices that are 600 pixels wide and up. And so when you add one media query, as I've done here, this is no longer, these rules right here are no longer for all your device widths. These rules apply from 0 pixels wide to 600 pixels. And then this media query is 600 pixels and up. Okay, so the minimum device width is 600 pixels. And let's just, I'm going to comment this out for right now. And just what I like to do when I'm writing media queries is just get the simplest media query to work first before I add on. And so I'm gonna start by doing something very simple, and I'm gonna change the body background color to like an aqua, okay? And if I open up the page, you can see my body background color is aqua. Now, this is supposed to be from 0 to 600 pixels. That's because I have this commented out. Now let me show you this minimum width of 600 pixels. I'm actually going to write a conflicting rule here, so you can kind of see that I've got these curly braces that I'm going to write a bunch of CSS rules in. Okay, it's not just, this is not just one CSS rule. I'm going to write all my CSS rules that I need to write for this case, 600 pixels and up, inside of these curly braces. And so the first thing I might do is I'm just going to change the background color of my body background. It's interesting, I'm not getting my IntelliSense, so that makes me think I'm doing something off, but I'm not seeing it. So let's just say red. And minimum width 600 pixels. It wants a space here, and you know my spacing. It's just barking at my spacing. Now, when I added this media screen. So here the idea, and it's not working at the moment, so I'll fix it. I have a suspicion what it is. From 0 to 600 pixels, I've got one background color, and then 600 pixels and up, it should change it to red. Now that's not happening. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete this word screen because I think I might have butchered that. Okay. Okay, so you could see that now that this is working, I got to figure out why it was. Now this is for all media types, including printers. I'm not really worried about it right now. I think I got a syntax problem there at media screen. I think it might be at media screen and or something like this. I'll look this up real quick. Point is, I just want to show you a simple media query, get it working, and it is. Now what should happen as I change the device width down, you could see that my background color changes. And so here you can see my media query is working. Real quick, I'm going to pause the recording and figure out my syntax problem.
It is media screen.
Okay, John just said that I was correct. Media screen and the word and.
Yeah.
Okay, so I forgot my keyword and okay, now it's still working. Okay, so I've demonstrated a media query here, and let me just elaborate on this to say, okay, let's write another media query at media screen and minimum width to just demonstrate this a little bit more, and I'll say 900 pixels, which is the next breakpoint. And so it really just boils down to like cell phones.
Wrote screen.
Media screen, thank you. Okay, cell phones are going to be, and so cell phones have orientation, right? Horizontal, landscape, portrait and landscape orientation. And so these rules, basically from 0 to 600 pixels, are going to be basically cell phones in both portrait and landscape. Okay, then you start going 600 pixels and up, and you're talking about tablets. Then you start talking 900 pixels. Maybe this is a tablet in landscape. And then after that, at media screen and min width 1200. Again, just increments of 300. And these are basically the media queries that I'm going to recommend. Okay, so and we'll kind of just change background colors here. Background color, who really cares? Now it's a little unfortunate that I'm losing some, let's see, body. Let's see, this should be working now. Now I'm getting my IntelliSense back that I wrote my media queries right. So I'll say blue, violet, and body, background color, brown. So anything greater than 1200 pixels wide, we got brown, then you go between 9 and 12, you got blue, violet, then you got red, then you've got aqua. And I'm just changing the background color. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's just a real simple thing to see that your media queries are working. Red, and that color, and let's see if I can get it to, oh, I already got the brown. So yeah, we got all 4 colors. So here's our brown, there's our red.
I think you're missing blue violet.
Yeah, you are.
I'm missing blue violet.
Yeah.
Is it because there's no space after and? Maybe.
I don't think so. Hey, well, how? I said I don't think so. How wrong can I be? I was blatantly wrong, but that's okay. That's,
It didn't alert you too, which is kind of odd.
there you go. Yay, media queries. Media queries are intimidating when you're first learning them. Break them down, small pieces. They're not so bad. If you can break them down into doing something just like this, media queries are not so bad. And so let's think about maybe, okay, so in the real world, you know, on your mobile devices, how do they handle nav bars? Well, they got this little, what we'll call cheeseburger menu. You know that little button that you click and the nav bar expands. Okay, that's going to require a little bit of JavaScript, and we will have that like next week. We'll be doing those cheeseburger menus next week.
I think there's a way to do it in CSS.
Yeah, definitely. There's probably a pure HTML CSS way to do that, no doubt. But okay, let's just say for now we don't have the, for now, so there's our media queries. Let's go back to our nav bar. Okay, since we don't have the cheeseburger menu, let's change our unordered list. Let's change our flex direction to be a column, right? That's to say that in our mobile devices, the flex direction is going to be up and down. And then as soon as we break 600 pixels and up, I'm going to conflict with that rule, and I'm going to say flex direction row. Okay, so 600 pixels it'll be row, 900 pixels it'll still be row, 1200 pixels it'll still be row. It's basically 600 pixels and up, unless there's something that conflicts with it here, right? So let's go ahead and see that once we get down to, okay, now our nav bar is a column in a mobile, and as soon as we break, wherever we want that breakpoint to be, we can change our nav bar to be a row. And if you're watching this video, what do they say?
Seizure warning?
Thank you. Yeah, I might need to insert a seizure warning.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you see how this rule still applies unless there's a conflicting rule in one of the other media queries, right? And so there was a conflicting rule for background colors, so we changed the background colors at each point. But really, I just wanted to get my media queries working. I really don't need these background colors. Let's remove the seizure warning. And let's just have our flex direction row. And now we're keeping the same background color, and that works. So, okay, let's just fill out how we might want this to work. I'm gonna demonstrate a wrapper just because some people got this right on the hands-on test, and some people, I think, were following my instructions to the T, which meant they didn't finish it. So a wrapper div is pretty commonly, we're going to target wrapper, the ID of wrapper, and there's two CSS properties that you need to configure, which are width. You need to configure the width, and I like using the viewport width, and so I'll just use 90 viewport width. And you also need to consider the margin 0 auto. And so now I've got this wrapper configured, and if I inspect here, you can kind of see that the wrapper has about what, 10% left over? What did I say, 90? So there's 10% left over, which means 5 and 5 on each side. So there's, if I look at the wrapper, I got the margin. It's kind of figuring out how much margin is on the left and right, which winds up being about 5%. Okay, now I'm also interested that this header, this nav, let's see, this UL. Oh, okay, look at this UL. This UL has some padding on it. I could see that green on the UL. Looks like there's actually 40 pixels of padding on my UL, and that's there as a browser default. You could see padding inline start 40 pixels. And so that's kind of a default behavior of an unordered list. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add in a normalize. And I'm just going to download normalize into my documents, GitHub, repos, homework chapter 5, normalize CSS. And I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to link to normalize first. Oh, I'm in my chapter 9 homework. Let's try that again. Chapter 9 homework, normalize. Now we got normalize in there, and now we've got normalize in there. And so now that I link to normalize, let's see if that is still the case. Okay, that my UL, okay, it does. I thought maybe normalize would change that, and it didn't, which is fine. So I'm kind of not interested in this padding on my unordered list. And so I might come into here, and you could do something specific like padding left 0. And now you could see that my list no longer has padding, and I don't really have any unwanted spacing going on. If you really wanted to be upset about the links not being at the absolute top, I could fix that as well, but I'm not too upset about that. The reason my links, take a look at that. So this hover tool is amazing. If I hover the UL, I click on the UL, I can see that there's some margin on my UL. Right, so I'm also going to say margin top 0, and now my links go to the tip top. And not that that's important. You could have that or not. Okay. Back to the problem. I want a vertical nav bar, and well, let's get these links looking like buttons. And so I'm going to inspect these. And I'm going to see that the LI, keep in mind, the LI, the UL is display flex. You can even see right here in Chrome tools, it's a Flexbox. It says flex right here. That's kind of nice. Therefore, each direct child is a flex item. And these LIs are block level elements. And so, you know, I could start doing things on them like setting their width and background colors, etc. So I'm going to say all of the LIs that are part of a UL, you could just say LI and it would work just the same. I just want to say padding. I don't know. That's padding on all four sides, and I just want to see that we're getting some padding, and that's cool. Now our links have some padding, so they're not like butting up against one another. Now it's interesting to note that the padding remember we talked about collapsed margins. This padding is separate from that padding, so the padding doesn't collapse like the margin does, like we demonstrated that last week. Let's just put a background color on these LIs and see what happens. And let's add a font color of white. Now, why did that not work? You might think that the anchor tags are inside of the LIs, and that's true. So you would think that the color would be inherited by the anchor tags. The background color worked, but the links have their specific selector here. And to change anything with these links, you have to basically put the property on that. Oddly enough, that did not inherit from the parent. Normally text color does, but these links are particular. They don't work that way. Now our links are white. So now we've got some things kind of looking like buttons, and this kind of looks like a pretty normal nav bar. And maybe we could do something like centering the text. Now, how would you center the text? Well, you could do text align center, and that would make sense, but also keep in mind there's a lot of things that we learned with Flexbox that can kind of change these child elements in relation to one another. You know, I'm going to go ahead and do in the LI. I think I'll start with the text align center and see, you know, that's clearly pretty easy to do. Getting those links in the middle there, and when we expand, all right. And so, you know, at a bare bones, we've got a Flexbox nav bar, and we've got media queries, and if you wanted your page to scale up to these different devices, again, I would say between 6 and 9, between 600 and 900. So this one, I would say from 0 to 600, basically mobile devices. Okay, so these rules that are not inside of a media query, these are for your mobile devices, both landscape and portrait. 600, now this is between 6 and 900 pixels, right? Between 6 and 9. And I would say this is for tablet vertical, which is your portrait. Okay, this one is between 9 and 12. Which basically is your tablet landscape. Yeah, and then this one is for widescreen desktop monitors. Basically 1200 pixels and up. And it just turns out that these breakpoints are easy to remember, and if you stop and think about it, you could figure out generically, because not all devices have the same width. That's kind of the challenge with these breakpoints, is that an iPhone has a different width than a iPhone Plus and an iPhone Pro and an iPhone Max. Not to even mention all the Samsungs and all of the, Pixels, and, there's hundreds of devices out there. So these are some just very generic rules for breakpoints that are easy to remember, and they apply generically. And they're easy to remember. Questions out there in the Discord world, or John in person?
I got a quick question about, so in your window, is there an easier way to kind of like view the size of your site versus...
Oh, great question. So I was doing this literally yesterday. I was just kind of double checking my work a little bit. And yes is the answer to your question. Hit F12, you're going to come up with the inspect tool. This little toolbar right here is called the Device Toolbar. And when it works properly, it works great. Yesterday, it wasn't working for me, but let me show you, at least in theory, how it should work. Toggle the Device Toolbar, and you've got all of these devices. You can kind of say this is a Pixel 5, and you can see that the dimensions are changing, and you can custom change your dimensions. So you could say like 1300 pixels wide and 900 wide. But what happens is, like if I go down to 400 pixels, that should be a single column nav bar. And so I don't know. This used to work. Literally, I've used this tool for a long time. As of yesterday, on my computer, this device toolbar, like it wasn't showing. Like I can change my device width, and it's really nice because it shows you the dimensions, and it does have some preset phones and things like that in there, or you can edit your own. And so this is a great tool when it works. It's just, it wasn't working. So the only way that I knew to test it otherwise is just literally doing this with the window. But yeah, this tool, and I don't know if it's just my computer. It might just be my computer. You guys will have to check it out and let me know if that tool works for you. Now, what's a little bit annoying is that when you turn this on, you'll notice that this goes blue. And if you turn the toolbar off and you turn it back on, it's still on. So you just got to remember that when this is blue, this is the device toolbar. You just got to uncheck it and turn it back off to get to your normal inspect. So in other words, this is a setting that you got to remember to turn off. When you don't want to use it, turn it off. It just kind of stays on. So whatever. But I wish I had a better answer. Typically it works, and I'm really curious if it's just my computer right now, or if it's just not working. Because again,
when you're using that tool, did the style sheets jump in and get in the way?
Well, historically, if I would do this, right? So if I would say 400 pixels by 400 pixels tall, well, this should show a single column. This should show a single column. And so, yeah, your style sheets should load. I don't know. And yeah, so I'm kind of curious, like even if I were to, maybe it is on my computer, maybe if I just were to check it out on another website, so like InsideRankin.org, and if I hit F12, yeah, see, it does seem to work on Inside Rankin. See, like they got the hamburger menu there, right? And then probably could be a better experience kind of here in this area, but whatever. But it doesn't matter. That's the tool. That was the question. I think I answered your question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question. Glad you asked. With that, you now have the tools to finish your homework assignment from Chapter 9, right? Because I think in Chapter 9, it did talk about basically making this, which is a nav bar that responds to a breakpoint. So you can use this video for your homework, and that will be helpful. I'll go ahead and stop the recording here.